So everybody's been asking about my story and my side of being banned in the UK, and I will absolutely share that with you. But before we do that, please everybody get over to surviveviolence.com. This is where you can sign up for a free masterclass. This is also how we can keep in touch with you to make sure that you have the latest information on any new content that's coming out, seminars, products, anything the subject matter experts want to share with you that you hear on this channel. It's the best way to keep in touch with us. Also, the best way to protect yourself in case I do get deplatformed. And I have to say, with the UK banning, I probably was one of the original cancel cultures, especially over in Europe, in the UK. I had a long history with the UK, a very positive history of training over there. You know, my military years. I went to school there in 2011. I ended up getting banned. But before I tell you the rest of the story, I have to warn you that yes, you are taking a risk by watching this because I'm still banned. So I'm going to tell the story. Now listen, I had been going over to the UK up until 2011 for over 20 years. I went to school there. I went to university. I went to the University of London for a year and did London School Economics classes. Really enjoyed it. And then in my military years, I was over there doing a lot of stuff with NATO. We were doing special operations training over there. I trained hand-to-hand combat to NATO groups over there over the years as a contractor, and then trained a lot of civilian courses in the UK, and had no problems. Never had any issues whatsoever until the riots of 2011. Now, I think a little background would be good. You should kind of see how the UK press treated me prior to the ban. I was always good for sound bites. They'd love to soundbite me and make me sound like an absolute maniac. But I'll give you some examples. So here are some various quotes that they pulled on me. The Sun says, when violent situations require a killer be killed mentality. Larkin teaches you how to think like a predator was Forbes when they interviewed me there. The Evening Standard said, I was taught to kill a man last week. That's when we had one of their people come and attend a course. You have to hit back hard and forget the rules. That was Fighting Fits, an MMA magazine that was over there. Release your inner Terminator, the Daily Telegraph. Very colorful stuff. Other things like Zoo Magazine. Tim Larkin teaches people how to pummel the life out of an attacker. Extreme Workshops condemned by anti-violent campaigners. That was Best Magazine when I did which was a female magazine. Larkin, muscular, fit, and not somebody I would like to remotely want to cross. That was another great one from the Evening Standard. So that kind of gives you an idea of how they do. Here's some looks at some of the articles. You know, how to kill a man in 4 moves. I paid a man to teach my girl to kill. That was from Best. And it was fantastic. And then there's Fighting Fit, Appetite for Destruction. Now, the reason I'm giving you this context is just to show, like, hyperbole is huge over there. Now, 2011 was a great year for me. In 2011, I was part of the class that was inducted into the Black Belt Hall of Fame. I also was, as you can see here, I was the instructor of the year. So I was coming off of that. So it was a really good year for me as far as, you know, press and as far as awards and notoriety and all that good stuff. I was really on an uptick. And what happened was when the riots occurred in London, I was interviewed. I was living in Las Vegas at the time when they interviewed me. So I wasn't physically over there. But I had a lot of relationships with the press, and they wanted me to comment on that. They wanted to know, hey, have any of your students been affected by any of the riots? And it was a BBC interview, and I said, oh, yeah, you know, I gave back and forth. And we talked about things. It was a very sober interview. The interviewer was great, nothing outrageous. I did say that, hey, it might be a time where the UK wants to rethink their self-defense laws, because the last time they made any significant changes was in the 1950s, and the dynamics have very, very much changed. Well, what was interesting is everybody reported that legitimately, except for the Mirror. The Mirror is kind of like a tabloid. The Mirror put out a put out a term, and I totally ignored it at the time. But it said, I think it was around page 6 or something of the Mirror. It said Larkin to lead riot tour. It said that. Why? Because when the BBC asked me, "Are you going to go to any riot areas?" I said, "Yeah, actually." I said, I have some people in Tottenham, some people, and I named off a couple of different places, Brixton and stuff. And I said, my people had called me to say, hey, basically very positively say, hey, Tim, I recognize things were getting asocial. I was able to get myself and my family out of there. Nobody took action, on any of that stuff. It was just all very, very positive. But the Mirror needed a little bit of, hype, and they said I was to lead a riot tour. Like I was literally going to deliberately go into the areas of the riot areas, and I was going to promote, fighting back, basically. I didn't think much of it at the time at all, and kind of ignored it. But I have to give you one more piece of history. Years before, I believe it was like 2008, 2007, I was doing a course in Slough, which is right outside of England, outside of London. And Slough is most famous for, that's where the UK Office, the very popular show The Office, was filmed. That was the place. In the US, it was Dunder Mifflin. But the town in the Ricky Gervais version of Office, the original Office, the town was Slough, and Slough is known for, kind of being a boring office place. Well, when I was there, they had, during that time, I was interviewed by the local press because the knife crime was really, really going crazy. And I went on a talk show, and also on the talk show was the MP of that district. I forgot, her name is Rosie something. I forgot what it was. But I didn't think too much of it. It went back and forth. Most people agreed with me. Most people on the round table ended up agreeing with me. Of course, she didn't, because it was her district, and she didn't want to admit that they had the knife crime problems that they had. So it was a very typical interview that I have. They usually brought me in as the crazy American, kill them all, let God sort them out type of thing. Afterwards, in the green room, I said bye to everybody. I said goodbye to the MP, and I also said goodbye to her friend next to her, who I guess also was another MP. And I just shook my hand, and that was it. So fast forward to what I just told you about, the riots. The Mirror comes out with that article. Well, guess who uses that article? Yes, the MP from Slough took that article, and she sent it to her friend. The MP sitting next to her at that time was Theresa May, who back in 2011 was the Home Secretary. Yes. And so that was sent to him. And yes, they remembered me from that interview, and they used that to issue a travel ban on me in 2011, unbeknownst to me. They said they informed me, but they didn't. So I am getting ready in 2012. I had been invited to a huge conference in Birmingham, a martial arts conference. I was going to be a keynote speaker. Again, I was going to be given an award there. Some other prominent martial artists were speaking there. It was actually going to be a really cool event. And I was getting ready to fly over there. I went to Vegas. I went to the airport. And when I went to the airport, I went to the Virgin counter. I flew over on Virgin all the time. There's a 4:00 flight that flies out of Vegas. And sure enough, I give my passport. I knew something was weird. It was absolutely crazy. And I was, they were delaying me, and it was huge. I mean, if anybody's ever been to the 4:00 flight in Vegas, it's packed. I mean, people are there. I mean, I had people all around me, and all of a sudden I see the look on the woman's face who is trying to, stall me. And all of a sudden I hear from behind me, I go, "Mr. Larkin." And I turn around, and it's this gentleman. He's dressed impeccably in a 3-piece suit. He looked every part of the British civil service. He just needed the bowler hat and the umbrella, and it would have been perfect. And he goes, "I am here to present you with a letter from the UK border department, and you will not be allowed to put this flight. The Home Secretary, Theresa May, has determined that you are a threat to the UK and you will not be allowed to travel to the UK. And here's your letter. Let me show you the letter. There we go. This is the letter from the UK Border Agency. Okay, and it's very nicely done, and he presented it very, very nicely. Now, a couple of things before I show you what the letter says. Interesting part about this was it was presented to me. It was supposedly supposed to hit me in December of 2011, which is when they enacted the ban. I did not see this till I believe almost May. That's when I was flying out, May of 2012. And it was interesting. It's gonna play out a little bit later, but let's see what they actually said. Okay. So let me pull this up here and move it over for you. All right. So if we look at this, it says the purpose of this letter is to inform you that on 28 November 2011, after a most careful consideration, the Home Secretary personally directed, keeping it personally directed that you should be excluded from the UK on the basis that your presence here would not be conducive to the public good. This is because your proposed self-defense training seminars, billed as a UK riot tour, which I never did. I didn't do that. Others did that. Are targeted at areas of the UK affected by riots and is considered to be conduct that may inflame community tensions in the areas affected by the riots and causing public order offenses by encouraging excessive violence and vigilante-type behavior. There is no right of appeal against the Home Secretary's decision to exclude you from the United Kingdom. The decision is reviewed every 3 to 5 years, which is really vague, and I can give you more background on that. And then, they sit there and tell you, where it's at. Now, the interesting part about this, let me take this down real quick. The interesting part about that was when we went to, and now I'm informed, right? It's May. You only had 3 months, 90 days to challenge this, okay? And my attorneys, got together. I got my barristers. I got some very good attorneys over in the UK. And they went to go to the UK High Court and they said, hey, we want to prosecute this case. This is there. And they said, nope, can't prosecute the case. It's been more than 90 days. And they said, wait a minute. You flew a guy 6,000 miles to personally present a letter to this guy when he was going to fly out to the UK. If you're so certain that you gave him confirmation and that you were informed, why did you fly somebody out prior to him getting on the plane to do that? So it was a pretty good thing, meaning we were saying our 90 days should start from the May date so I could fight it. They held firm. So the case was never heard on its merits, which of course would have, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you heard from talking to Lee, when you heard my interview with Lee Morrison, and there are other great trainers over there. We train a lot of the same principles. Yes, our methods are a little bit different. Yes, I don't have the British accent. I have the American accent when I go over there. But, really, it was a ridiculous thing they were on. It was just a very vindictive shot at me, because, again, I brought up an uncomfortable truth about knife crime. And a couple of years later, they were able to take a shot at me. Now, what's been interesting is people were telling me, don't worry. The government's going to be out soon, and Theresa May, nobody likes her. She'll be gone. She'll be done in politics. So what happens? Guess who becomes the next prime minister? Yes, as you all know, Theresa May. So they said, hey, listen, there's no way you can bring a case against this. She's never going to admit that she was wrong. And the way the UK legal profession works, I was, taken out of it. So I have a lot of customers over in the UK. And I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go over there. I couldn't train anymore. I was stuck. We were hoping that when the new administration got in after Theresa May left office under the current prime minister, that we would be able to get back in. But because of COVID, everything's been backed up, and it's just been ridiculous. Now I'm hoping that maybe in the coming year I can get this overturned and get back to training in the UK. But it was a very real cancel culture, and it was very vindictive. And it's because I brought up unpopular information, basically that there's a knife crime problem, that the self-defense laws that the British citizens have to use to protect themselves are really antiquated in a lot of ways and very, very pro-criminal. And this is something that is brought up by the UK people all the time. You know, they any time there was a poll ran, it went. I think the Guardian did a poll for me, and the Guardian's a left wing paper, and yet 75% of the people thought it was ridiculous that I got banned, and sided with me on my my approach. Because as any of you guys watching this, you know I have a very sane and sober approach when it comes to using violence. But when you're facing grievous bodily harm, like a lot of people were during the UK riots, a lot of them were hesitating to protect themselves because they were worried about legal action taken against them. And that just goes against everything. The UK has a long history of actually having great self-defense. They wrote some of the best self-defense laws. Justice Black, very famous justice in the UK, wrote some outstanding stuff that we use today in the US on self-defense. It wasn't until the 50s that things really got changed in self-defense laws. And I'm not going to go into why. It was basically because they had roving street gangs, and they made it very difficult to prosecute them, because the street gangs would basically say, oh, I didn't start this. I was helping my friend out. So they gave these draconian laws that said nobody could assist somebody being attacked. I'm being very general on this. But that change in law really changed the way citizens can respond to threats. It's very dicey over there. So I was found it a really amazing challenge over there to train, and there's some incredible trainers like Lee over there that are doing their best to help people navigate those waters. But yeah, it was a very real thing. I know some of you thought maybe I was kidding that I was banned. No, I was banned, and this is long before any of the social media stuff, before any of this cancel culture stuff. So I learned a long time ago that your words can have actions, and free speech is something that is only free. You're free to say anything that you want, but they're also free to shut you down. And I learned that long before COVID, that's the case. And I paid for it. I paid for it for using terms like violence and advocating for citizens to use the fullest extent of the law to protect themselves. So that's my story. That's what happened. And like I said, I'm really after talking to Lee, I'd like to get over there just to go have a beer with him and hang out. So I'm really kind of hoping that I can get this thing overturned in the next year or so. I'll probably have my attorneys look at it again, but it's not going to be a simple road. The legal system over there is very different than the legal system here in the U.S. So that's the story. That's why I can't do seminars in the UK. I will thank Theresa May, because there was a huge spike in product sales over in the UK after this. And I was very thankful that it didn't get into the Commonwealth, because I can still go to Australia. I can still go to Canada. The Commonwealth, did not follow the UK or the Home Secretary. So I was extremely thankful about that. But currently, as it is right now, I'm in the 10th year of my ban from the United Kingdom. So that's the story. Thanks for asking. Thanks for all the support you've been giving me on this channel as it grows. And, again, guys, just remember, surviveviolence.com. All you got to do is give us your email. You get a free masterclass. And again, I'm hoping after hearing this story that it's worthwhile, because you see what's happening right now. And at any time, people can just turn you off. And I want to make sure I can still reach you with this type of information. So all the best. Keep your questions coming in. Keep your suggestions coming in for other interviews and other content that you'd like to see here on the channel. Take care.